Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a few people had asked when I did my Mike O'Hearn video yesterday and when I talked about him selling these duck eggs for $699 for a month's supply. The question that comes up invariably when that happens is, what is it about the fitness industry itself that makes this industry so prone to scams and con men and just complete absolute horseshit, and why it seems to work? Well, the thing is, I think most of us who've been around know that most industries have this problem, but it does seem very prominent and above average in the fitness industry, and not just the supplement industry, but the fitness industry as a collective. And realistically, there's a couple of different factors that allow for this. High on the list is going to be the fact that there isn't a whole lot of regulation and oversight. There is more and more of it, but the fitness industry itself and the supplement industry also is a side on to that, is a relatively new industry. There isn't always a lot of data to determine if people are being scammed or ripped off or whatever. And so there's not a lot of oversight. Now, I personally am a big fan of free markets. I'm a big fan of capitalist type models. However, I do think there should generally be some oversight in place to stop people from being scammed, from being sold dangerous products without the proper warnings on them. I'm okay with people buying dangerous products as long as they are educated on the risk when they're making them. And just blatant false advertising is something that should actually be illegal. I mean, for obvious reasons. But outside of that, I generally like to see most markets somewhat unrestricted so that we can actually have a free flow of goods and services. Now, that being said, the thing with the supplement industry, there isn't a lot of oversight. It isn't always enforced because it's so new that there tends to be a lot of scams out there. I mean, people are getting busted all the time for putting illegal drugs in supplements and things. That happens a lot. But there has to be testing and people have to stay on top of it. So you see tons of that, and the same with the false claims. Like the supplement industry does get hammered for false claims pretty often, but it's much harder to do in the whole scope of not just supplements, but diet books, diet methods, training methods, things like that. There's always a big hype and false advertising around it that hasn't really been cracked down on. And so because of that, there's just not as much government regulation as there is of older industries saying, hey, you can't just advertise this Ford Focus and say that it'll go 300 miles an hour. You can't just advertise this Ford Focus and say people are getting 1,000,000 miles out of it. In the supplement industry and the fitness industry and stuff, people make those sort of bogus claims and they aren't arrested or fined for it. They're allowed to false advertise a lot more. And there's been a long tradition of that. It's not just a current thing, but if you think about it, the earliest part of the fitness industry that we have, at least in America, was the old snake oil salesman that went around. And that's one reason I call people in the fitness industry snake oil salesmen oftentimes, because that's a reference to the earliest example of that, of people going around trying to sell magic elixirs that didn't do anything and oftentimes were just snake oil or just called snake oil and it had magical healing properties. You see the same sort of nonsense here in the fitness industry. Again, selling fertilized duck eggs for $700 and claiming that they're a fountain of youth, that they're going to have longevity properties like growth hormone does. So you see a lot of that. And the other component is not just the traditions of that industry or the fact that it's really, as a modern industry, is fairly new, so there isn't a lot of oversight on the false advertising and false claims like there is in other industries. But then there's the component that the majority of people who it advertises to are much younger people. Now, older people like me, I'm about to turn 39 this week, we tend to be more savvy to scams and cons because we've seen so many scams and cons over the years that we just look at stuff and say, oh, that's such horseshit. That's false advertising. That guy doesn't use those supplements. He's clearly on drugs. This is bullshit. We tend to just look at that stuff and laugh more, whereas in someone who's 16, 17, 18, maybe even 20, they have less world experience. They are easier to scam, easier to con, and they're more gullible. And what happens with the whole fitness world is that since that is such a massive part of their market, they have a more gullible audience. And I'm not making fun of younger people. I used to be a younger person. We were all more gullible at that age. We had less life experience. We didn't always know how to assess if something was really hype or bullshit that was being sold to us. You buy into hype easier because it sounds good, it's flashy. A product or a service or whatever, oh, this guy is massive and ripped, so he must know what he's talking about, without realizing that he might not. He just might have really good genetics and be on a lot of drugs, or he might not even use the methods or things that's being sold. But the thing is, a big flashy advertisement hype, building a community around it, makes it really, really easy to scam younger people. And that's what any industry in the whole fitness world really capitalizes on that. And so that's the other big component that makes it so easy to scam people. And by the time those younger people grow up and get older, they're now kind of falling out of the fitness world, and a lot that stay in it, the few say, hey, look, all this stuff was nonsense that was being sold, but it doesn't matter because they're a minority voice. They're a dissonant voice, and the majority in the industry and all its advertising is still pushing all the other nonsense, and those older voices who tend to get drowned out, other than a few of us who still talk about it. So they have a new batch of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds every 3 or 4 years to rotate back in and sell goods and services to, with the same flashy advertising and nonsense. And by the time they're old enough to and wise enough to understand it's all bullshit, there's a whole new batch ready to replace them. So it just kind of keeps churning. So that is the reasons why the fitness industry is so prone to scams, bullshit, and con men. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.